All we wanted to know was what's wrong with me? What can you do to fix me?
This is just out of control. Strange doesn't begin to describe what we thought was going on.
I was afraid she was going to kill herself.
I knew that something was seriously wrong, and I was absolutely terrified.
You never expect that they're going to tell you your child's going to die if we don't do something tonight.
My biggest fear in the whole world would be that I would not be a mom anymore and I would no longer have her.
Next, two medical mysteries that defied the experts. Jennifer Julian is suffering from periodic blackouts, and all she wants to do is sleep. But when doctors can find no cause for her strange constellation of symptoms, she begins to wonder if one day she simply won't wake up.
Everyone says nothing's wrong with me, but I'm not going to live much longer if this is the way my life is going.
Then, everyone thinks 11-year-old Carol Lauer is just being overly dramatic about her seemingly ordinary headaches, until she begins to lose sight in both her eyes.
I wasn't in all this pain without a reason. There had to be something.
When illness strikes, we look to doctors to give us answers. But what if they can't? For these unlucky patients, diagnosis is a mystery. In the spring of 1999, Jennifer Julian celebrated her 16th birthday and passed her driving test with flying colors. The Jackson, Mississippi sophomore couldn't have been happier.
You know, I was a typical happy teenager who, enjoyed doing things with my friends and enjoyed sports a lot.
She was always very active. She's very talkative, had very many friends, lots of friends.
She was involved with a program for gifted students and made very good grades.
Then, one night when she least expects it, Jennifer's whole world is turned completely upside down on Highway 25.
My mom and I were driving back from seeing my grandmother, and a car was on a dirt road illegally trying to cross the highway, and they pulled out in front of me before I even had time to stop. I didn't get to hit my brakes, and I was going 65 miles an hour.
Jennifer plows into the car head-on and loses consciousness on impact. Her mother is sitting in the passenger seat in a state of shock.
The whole thing was extremely frightening. You feel like it's not even you, that maybe this is just something you're watching or a dream, a bad dream that you're seeing.
Jennifer's mother struggles to keep it together as the paramedics pull her only daughter from the car.
I was sitting there saying, wake up, wake up, wake up, and basically I was hysterical.
I lost consciousness. I just remember my mom was screaming at me, trying to get me to wake up.
As soon as the ambulance arrives at the hospital, a team of doctors begin running a series of tests to assess the teenager's injuries. The next 5 hours seem to pass in slow motion.
It's like life just stood still.
Finally, the medical team has the answers the Julians have so anxiously been waiting for. Jennifer has not sustained any discernible injuries.
And so they just sent me home saying, you're going to be really sore tomorrow. Here's some muscle relaxers. And that was it.
We were extremely grateful and are extremely grateful that we walked away from that.
Over the course of the next week, Jennifer puts the traumatic experience behind her and slips right back into her routine.
I went back to hanging out with my friends and having a good time, and everything was good, other than just being a little sore.
But nothing could have prepared the teenager for what would happen next.
I was cutting the lawn. I started feeling dizzy, and I just kind of ignored it at first. Then the next thing I knew, my lawnmower was in front of me, and I was on the grass. And I had basically passed out.
Sprawled out on the lawn, Jennifer comes to a few minutes later, scared and confused.
I just thought maybe I didn't eat something that I should have, and I just kind of thought that was strange.
At first, she brushes off the bizarre incident, until she passes out again, and again, and again.
It would come on like a swimmy feeling in my head. I would feel real lightheaded and kind of tingly all over, and then I would see black spots before me, and then everything would just go black. And I'd wake up and I would have lost time. I wasn't sure what had happened. But after it kept happening, I got more and more worried.
In just 3 weeks, Jennifer has fainted at least 5 times. Alarmed by the frightening episodes, her mother takes her to see the family pediatrician. While the doctor is giving Jennifer a thorough exam, Marilyn gives her a detailed account of the fainting spells and the accident.
It seemed logical to us that the wreck might have had something to do with it.
But the doctor is confident that the car crash has nothing to do with the seemingly random blackouts. She suspects there's something far more serious going on and immediately performs a tilt table exam, a test used to evaluate unexplained fainting by measuring the patient's blood pressure and heart rate as they're strapped to a table and tipped back and forth.
To me, it was just like torture because it was like you were slowly feeling your body go out. It was very uncomfortable. I was bawling, crying. I said, please, please stop this test.
It's clear Jennifer's heart rate and blood pressure are dropping at a dangerous rate, which is reducing the blood supply to her brain. When this happens, she passes out. The test confirms that she has a classic case of neurally mediated syncope, or NMS. The doctor puts the teen on a beta blocker to help keep her heart rate and blood pressure in balance.
I was like, well, good, maybe this medicine will quit making me feel dizzy and having to pass out.
Over the next few weeks, Jennifer diligently takes the prescription. Yet, the erratic syncope spells continue.
I felt dizzy just about every day, and I just wasn't sure what was causing it. Most of the time, I would sit down and put my head between my knees before I would pass out, and that would help.
But as she struggles to manage the seemingly random attacks, a new and far more terrifying series of symptoms begin to emerge.
Jennifer came in the den, and she said, I really don't feel good. I really feel strange. And then I looked at her, and her face was a little distorted. One side was kind of droopy. And I thought that was really strange. And then I noticed her speech was slurred.
It was extremely scary when you see your child and they can't talk to you and their speech is not like it normally is.
Panicked, Jennifer's father tries to gauge just how quickly his daughter is losing her ability to talk by asking her to count backwards.
She counted backwards 100, slowly and slurred, 100, 99, and I know she didn't get to 95. My immediate reaction was, this could be a stroke.
The Julians race their only daughter to the closest hospital. As soon as they arrive, a pediatric neurologist is called to the scene. He immediately orders a CAT scan of her brain to find out for sure if she's had a stroke. Jennifer is overwhelmed by the mysterious and frantic turn of events.
I started getting really scared. I didn't know what was happening.
I think that we both considered, without ever saying, that this could be an event that goes really wrong, and we would not be able to do anything about it.
As soon as the doctor has the CAT scan results in hand, he races down to Jennifer's room. It's clear she has not had a stroke. In fact, her brain appears to be perfectly normal.
I was relieved. Then I was just kind of like, well, then what's going on? Something's not right. You know, if that's not what it is, then what is it?
Just a few months after surviving a terrifying car crash, 16-year-old Jennifer Julian suddenly began experiencing frightening stroke-like symptoms that no doctor could explain. And now it's becoming clear that something even more bizarre is going on with her body.
I noticed that my underarm hair, it was getting where I didn't have to shave it as much. I noticed it as well on my legs. I could go maybe 2 weeks without having to shave, and then it just quit growing at all.
She said, no, I just don't have to shave anymore. And I'm like, what? Now her body had stopped doing the things that it's supposed to do.
The Julians write off the peculiar development. But as the year progresses, they begin to worry again when their usually active daughter doesn't want to get out of bed.
I just remember that all I wanted to do was sleep, get as much sleep every day as I could. At one point, I was sleeping probably 16 hours a day, and I would wake up and feel like I hadn't slept in 3 days.
You could not wake her up. And when you looked in her eyes, it was like nobody was there. They were just dull, and listless, just not like herself at all.
Anything I had to do in order to get more sleep, I was willing to do. I would just go to school and park in the parking lot and go to sleep in my car.
The constant realization that this was never getting better, only getting worse, was just extremely frustrating.
Throughout the next school year, Jennifer struggles to endure the weird constellation of symptoms that plague her on a daily basis. But it really hits home when they start taking a toll on her grades.
I started noticing that I couldn't do well in school. Before, I always had a very good memory. I could read something once and remember it, and now it was like I could read it 5 times and I still couldn't remember it.
Jennifer, who was smart and made very good grades, all of a sudden she was this lazy, unmotivated student who slept.
The grades just continued to get worse and worse, and we started worrying, will she graduate from high school?
When Jennifer walks across the stage in May 2001, the Julians can hardly believe she managed to pass all of her classes.
If I hadn't been there, she probably wouldn't have graduated from high school. She required a great deal of help to get the work done, and this was completely unlike the way she had been before that time.
In an attempt to please her parents, Jennifer enrolls in the local community college.
I went for the first 2 weeks, and then I couldn't handle the fatigue anymore.
Less than a month after she started, Jennifer drops out. It's the hardest decision the former straight-A student has ever had to make.
I didn't say goodbye to anybody because I was embarrassed of what had happened and I didn't know what to tell people.
Sometimes I was angry. Sometimes I was just bewildered. Just every emotion you can think of.
My mind frame had no sense of consequences. All I cared about was today. What do I need to do today to get enough sleep?
Here was Jennifer just struggling to get by, and we had no idea what direction this was going to go.
Even Jennifer's brother Charlie can't help but notice the drastic change in his sister.
I was in college. I'd come home different holidays, I'd see Jennifer, and she seemed just like a different person. She slept a lot. She always seemed real depressed.
In an attempt to better understand the puzzling turn of events, the Julians send Jennifer to a psychiatrist.
We believed that this much change in personality had to be something mental.
After a few sessions, the doctor assures the Julians that their daughter is simply depressed, and he's sure antidepressants will help her snap out of it.
I took that diagnosis of depression and I accepted it, and I thought that that's what was wrong with me, and I just hoped that the medication they were going to give me was going to make me feel better.
Desperate to feel like her old self again, Jennifer takes the pills as instructed. And yet, the overwhelming fatigue persists.
They got to the maximum dose they could put me on, and it still had no effect on me.
Over the next couple of years, the Julians take her to at least a half a dozen different doctors, but each of them assures the troubled parents that there is nothing wrong with their daughter.
I don't know what's wrong with me. Everyone says nothing's wrong with me, but I'm not going to live much longer if this is the way my life is going.
I thought it was a mental illness, honestly. I thought she's just going to always be living with us. She's quickly becoming where she can't function in the real world.
I was afraid she was going to kill herself, that whatever was going on, that she would not be able to deal with it, and that, that maybe she would die.
At one point, they told me they were gonna get me committed to a mental institution, and I thought to myself that would be great. They would probably let me sleep all the time.
Almost 4 years after Jennifer's life first began to spiral out of control, her parents formulate a new plan of attack. They're convinced that all she really needs is to get back into a daily routine. They then charge their son Charlie with the task of waking Jennifer up each morning. Little do they know, it's a decision that will save the young girl's life.
I was studying for a bar exam, and so I went upstairs and to Jennifer's room, and I just made up my mind I was gonna, wake her up.
But nothing could have prepared him for the state Jennifer is in. She's completely passed out in a chair.
I saw that the chair was wet, and noticed that she was wet too, and so she had urinated on herself there. So immediately, bells were going off in my head. I tried picking her up and tried just getting her to move, and she was still not doing anything. She was not responsive at all.
Panic-stricken, Charlie calls their mother, who rushes home as fast as she can.
I will never forget the sight as I came close to our house. Charlie was leaning against the mailbox. Jennifer was a limp rag just draped over him, just not awake at all, just completely out of it. And I immediately called 911 and told them I was headed to the closest emergency room.
It was very frightening. I didn't want to lose my sister, but at that moment I thought that I was. I thought that she was going to die right there.
After struggling to live with relentless bouts of terrifying dizziness and chronic fatigue, Jennifer Julian seems to have reached her breaking point. She's blacked out completely, and now her mother is racing her to the emergency room.
I was just feeling hopeless. I was praying that she would be okay.
I woke up in the emergency room with my parents around me. I didn't know what had happened.
A few minutes later, the on-call doctor arrives and begins a head-to-toe exam.
First, he checked my blood pressure while I was sitting down, and then he asked me to stand, and he looked at me and he said, "I don't see how you're standing right now." And he explained that I didn't have a blood pressure.
Shocked by what he's seeing, the doctor immediately refers Jennifer to endocrinologist Dr. Robert Evans.
When I saw her originally, she was what we refer to in medicine as chronically ill.
He was very caring, and he sat there and he listened to everything we had to say.
I felt like finally I've got somebody that's willing to try to piece this thing together.
When she laid out her symptoms for me, I thought they were related to the deficiencies of particular hormones.
Dr. Evans' first step is to run a series of tests, including an ACTH blood test, which measures the level of cortisol in a patient's blood.
Cortisol is a steroid hormone that is secreted from the adrenal glands. It is critical to life. It helps maintain our blood pressure, helps maintain a lot of metabolic functions, and we found that her levels were very, very low. At that time, I knew it was significant.
Dr. Evans suspects that these astonishing results are indicative of a problem with the adrenal gland that produces cortisol. The adrenal gland, in conjunction with the thyroid, produces hormones responsible for cell growth, metabolism, and maintaining blood pressure. When these glands stop working, the body will essentially go into shutdown mode. When that happens, it's clear that the pituitary gland, which regulates almost every gland in the body, isn't functioning properly.
The pituitary gland is the master gland of our body. It tells the other major glands what to do. When I saw that the hormones from the pituitary that told the adrenal gland and the thyroid gland to work were low, I knew that she had hypopituitarism.
Hypopituitarism is a condition that affects the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland, a small bean-shaped gland located at the base of the brain. Despite its small size, this gland secretes hormones that influence nearly every part of the body. But in patients like Jennifer, the gland fails to produce one or more of the essential hormones. This deficiency can affect any number of the body's routine functions.
Hormones are vital to our survival. They affect your thinking ability and memory. And without particular hormones, the functions of our body just don't occur. You're tired. You don't feel well. Your hair becomes somewhat brittle and is not stimulated to grow correctly. When she stood, her blood pressure would drop. And in certain circumstances, if it dropped enough, she didn't get enough blood to her brain and she would faint.
It was kind of like, wow, I'm not crazy. There's really something wrong with me.
There was something finally that he could point his finger to and say, this is really a problem.
We were like, hallelujah. We can't believe this. Thank you, Dr. Evans.
But as the Julians digest their daughter's diagnosis, they can't help but wonder what could have triggered the disorder in the first place.
In Jennifer's case, she has an interesting history. It turns out she had an automobile accident at about age 16. So it is possible that the head trauma injured the pituitary gland and caused it to fail in her late adolescence.
That was a very emotional time to finally find out what caused it.
More than 5 years after the first symptoms set in, the the Julians have the answer they've been desperately looking for, leaving them to question why so many experts fail to identify the critical clues.
There were very non-specific symptoms. Unless one is specifically measuring the hormones and thinking of those particular hormones, then I think it's difficult to make that diagnosis.
One thing is clear. Jennifer is very lucky she was eventually diagnosed at all.
If left untreated, she could conceivably die. Usually in a stressful period, say for instance, she caught the flu. If she were untreated, she may get a very low blood pressure and die of shock.
But Dr. Evans assures them that with the diagnosis in hand, they can now combat the potentially life-threatening condition. In fact, 2 small pills taken every day can completely restore Jennifer's hormonal balance.
The pills that she takes are identical to the hormones that are made from the adrenal gland and the thyroid gland. It's as if she's making it herself.
And he said in about 24 to 48 hours, you'll feel like a completely different person.
After all that their only daughter has been through, the Julians find it hard to believe that 2 pills will really do the trick. But 48 hours later, Jennifer wakes up to a day she will never forget.
I remember coming running down the stairs with boundless energy for the first time in 5 years. And I said, this is what I'm supposed to feel like. This is what I should have been feeling like. 2 pills is all it took to get me to live a normal life again.
Today, Jennifer is doing exceptionally well. While she will always need to take hormone replacements, she's just thankful to finally be through the ordeal.
You can't take your own health for granted, and you should be proactive in finding answers for your own health.
We feel blessed and lucky that she's here with us and that she's all right.
My life has completely changed. Now I'm happily married. I'm as happy as I have ever been. My parents and my family get to see the person that I really am. They didn't have to think that their daughter was worthless.
Thank God that we had some doctors finally listen and that she's going to have a life.
While it took 5 years for Jennifer Julian to get her life back on track, it took only 3 weeks for Kara Lowers to take a dramatic turn for the worse, when a seemingly ordinary headache would simply not go away. For as long as she could remember, Julie Lauer had dreamed of becoming a mother. So when doctors told her she would not be able to conceive, it was the worst news she could have imagined.
I was told that I could not have children. They just didn't feel as though I would be able to carry a baby full term.
But in the spring of 1988, to everyone's surprise, she tests positive on a pregnancy test. For Julie, it's nothing short of a miracle.
All I ever wanted was to have a child and to be a mom, and so I was very overjoyed when I finally found out I was pregnant.
Doctors told her right up front that it was very possible and very probable that she would never carry the baby long enough to actually hold it in her arms.
But the next 9 months fly by without any complications. And on July 23, 1989, Kara May Lauer is born. Brian and Julie are on top of the world.
The first 10 weeks, I slept holding her hand.
How could you not love your only child, your firstborn, the little girl that Daddy always would want?
And when Kara eventually starts going to school, they're thrilled to discover that she's not only cute, but smart. By the beginning of 2001, the 11-year-old is healthy and seemingly no different than any girl her age.
I was enjoying my classes and doing really well. I was a happy, content 6th grader.
But then, in January of the following year, without any warning, a mysterious pain sets in.
She came home from school and said, I have a terrible headache.
It would feel like I could feel my heartbeat, but it was my brain pounding against the sides of my head.
For the next few days, the agonizing headache seemed to torture Kara. Her mother gives her the maximum dose of over-the-counter medications, but nothing seems to help.
At first, I just treated it as if it were a severe headache.
The whole time I was awake, my head was pounding, and the longer time went on, the worse they got, and the harder it was to go to sleep, even though I was exhausted.
Despite the harrowing headaches, Julie pushes her daughter to bite the bullet and go to school. She's sure they will pass. But now, 5 days after they began, Kara is worse than she's ever been, and every sound seems amplified in her head.
Any little sound that anyone made would make me cringe. I wanted a world without sound.
The longer it went and I couldn't get her any relief, the more concerned I became.
By day 7, the headaches have nearly crippled Kara, and Julie can't stand to see her daughter suffer any longer.
I told her, I said, that's it. Let's see if we can get some answers. This headache should not still be this bad.
She takes Kara to the pediatrician. He listens to the young girl describe the pain that has plagued her for over a week, and then proceeds to perform a thorough exam. When he looks into her eyes, he thinks he's found a critical clue.
The edges of the cornea should be a round, smooth circle, and when he looked into her eyes, they were like tattered and torn edges.
No one could have prepared Julie for what he has to say next. Based on what he can see in Kara's eyes, he suspects she may have a brain tumor. Hysterical, Julie calls Brian.
In a week's time, we went from I have a headache to possible brain tumors. Your mind races to the worst case scenarios. What are they talking about? How could this be?
For the past 7 days, 11-year-old Kara Lauer has endured round-the-clock, excruciating headaches.
It was extremely bizarre. I had never seen anyone that could not get relief from pain medication.
When her mother takes her in to see the family pediatrician, he suspects that the frightened girl is not suffering from run-of-the-mill headaches, but from a dangerous brain tumor. He needs a detailed image of her brain in order to confirm his hunch, and immediately sends Kara for an MRI.
She was extremely frightened of the test. Going into the MRI machine, she was very frightened of this.
When it's your only child and a child that you struggled to have, it's very hard to wait to hear what the doctors have found.
I was petrified that they were going to come back and say that this was a brain tumor. I just held my breath.
Just when they think they can't stomach the wait any longer, the findings come in. Kara's MRI is completely normal. The Lauers breathe a huge sigh of relief.
I was very relieved when they told me that the MRI was clear.
But at the same time, our concern was still there because Kara was still suffering from the same symptoms, and there obviously wasn't a brain tumor. What's causing these symptoms?
The doctor goes back to the drawing board and begins reviewing Kara's entire medical history. Based on the level of her pain and the duration of the headaches, he concludes that she's suffering from cluster migraines, severe headaches that occur almost daily in batches or clusters. While the doctor explains that there is no specific cure for cluster migraines, he can give Kara a prescription to dull the pain.
I was hoping, okay, this is just a migraine and we'll get some medicine and she'll go home and sleep and this will be behind us.
Kara spends the next 2 days in bed praying that the headaches will stop. But by the 3rd day, it's clear. The prescription pills haven't changed anything.
When the medicine didn't work, I was desperate for something to just take it away.
And just when she thinks she can't take it anymore, a bizarre new symptom emerges. Sporadic pain in her shoulders, her lower back, and especially near her kidneys.
She described the pain as a headache that just traveled through her body. It ached so bad she couldn't stand it.
We tried a heating pad on her back for pain, and then I would try rubbing or massaging, and just nothing seemed to give her any relief from this pain.
I hadn't been doing anything other than lifting my book bag and going to school, nothing out of the ordinary, so the pain had no reason for being there.
I thought maybe they were just muscle aches from laying so much with the headache and the not feeling well. I never dreamt there was anything more serious.
24 hours later, everything spirals out of control.
Walking down the hallway at home, the whole world would spin like I was on a carousel.
She'd have to either hold on to somebody or grab onto a wall and use that to guide herself down the hallway to get around the house. The symptoms that she was suffering almost seemed to be surreal.
My head would pound. My back and shoulder would pound in time with it. The dizziness would start up anytime I was standing. When all of the symptoms were working together, I would have given anything to have gotten rid of that pain.
As soon as the sun is up, the Lauers race Kara back to the doctor and insist that he find out what's causing the strange constellation of symptoms. The doctor vows to get to the bottom of things and admits his frightened patient into the hospital so that he can run a series of highly specialized tests.
They did an ultrasound to check the kidney, the bladder. They ran blood tests to make sure that they didn't miss an infection somewhere.
I was very anxious to find out what the results of the test were. We're going to find out what's going on. We're going to get some answers on this.
I was very scared at this point. I was afraid that there could be an underlying health condition that we had no idea of.
24 hours later, the test results are in, and no one is prepared for what they reveal. Kara appears to be perfectly healthy.
There didn't appear to be anything that they could put their finger on that was creating these problems.
I was so confused I didn't know which way to turn anymore.
They couldn't be right. There had to be something wrong. I wasn't in all this pain without a reason. There had to be something.
"11-year-old Kara Lauer has never been more terrified in her life. In the past 24 hours, she's simultaneously experienced intense migraines, acute dizziness, and seemingly random cramping. But after running a series of tests, the doctors can find nothing wrong with her. Still, they decide to keep her in the hospital for overnight observation.
At the time, I thought I was going beyond the boundaries of the human's limit for pain.
Completely drained by everything she's been through, Kara eventually drifts off to sleep. When she gets up to go to the bathroom, she's caught off guard when she realizes that she's started her period.
We thought, well, maybe this was the cause for the migraine and the aches and pains.
The next morning, Julie tells the doctor what's happened. He quickly concludes that as her body was preparing for its first menstrual cycle, it went a little haywire, causing the headaches, dizziness, and cramps.
They said, you know, you're going to have this for the next 40 years of your life. Get over it, learn to deal with it. This is part of being a woman.
When he explains to Kara that most women experience what she's going through each month, she is still not convinced.
I knew I was not making it up. I knew that something was wrong, but I was too young and I had no way to voice my opinion that anyone would understand and believe me.
The doctor pulls Julie aside for a private chat and suggests that perhaps her daughter is simply being a bit of a drama queen.
They just did not take her seriously. They thought that these pains were being fabricated by a child. Which direction do you go? Do you believe the doctor? Do you believe your child?
The doctors are telling me she's making this up. I hate not believing what she's telling me, but maybe she's just being dramatic.
No one believed me. I felt like I was at the very end of my rope, the very end of my sanity.
The doctor discharges Kara and encourages the Lauers to get their daughter back into her regular routine. Having a painful period is no excuse to stay home from school.
They said that it was very important that she went to school every day. I was raised to believe that the doctor had the schooling, he had the training, the knowledge. You believed them and you followed their instructions.
Kara pleads with her mother to let her stay home and rest, but Julie insists on following the doctor's orders. As she drops her off at school, Kara wonders how she's going to make it through the day.
Bright lights overhead, the loud noises made my migraine that much worse. But there's nothing in this world that could have prepared me for the true pain that I was yet to feel. My vision just went black. I could see nothing. My whole body froze. I had no idea what was happening, just that I couldn't see and that it terrified me.
No one around her seems to understand what she's going through. Within minutes, the bell rings, and Kara is stranded in the hallway, all alone.
I was so panicked and terrified. I can remember running my hand along the wall as a guide so I could feel where the doors were, and I knew that something was seriously wrong. It wasn't just gonna blow over. Something was gonna happen. And I was absolutely terrified.
Little does anyone realize that the last 20 minutes have been a living hell for 11-year-old Kara Lauer. Without any warning, she has lost her sight in an empty hallway. The school nurse happens to catch a glimpse of a student on the ground.
When the nurse found me, I know she must have been terrified.
The nurse calls Kara's mother, who drives her as fast as she can to the closest ophthalmologist, Dr. Stephen Olkowski.
When I met Kara for the first time, she was a very frightened 11-year-old girl. She was legally blind when she came into the office. When I looked into the back of the eye, there was a swelling of the optic nerve, and there was also hemorrhages in the retina.
He looked at me and said, "Oh my God, this child's not faking anything. I can see blood vessels exploding in her eyes."
At that point, I knew there's something very serious going on with Kara. A swollen optic nerve can indicate that there's some pressure on the brain. I knew I had to act quickly. If I did not act quickly, Kara could lose her sight and may also lose her life.
Excuse me? Everyone has been telling me she's lying, she's faking things, that there is nothing wrong with her. Now all of a sudden you're telling me she could die tonight? I was just in total disbelief at this point.
Finally, someone important, was going to believe me and help me.
I had to get Kara to the hospital as soon as possible. I did not want to wait to call an ambulance.
Within minutes, Julie has Kara back in the car. As she's racing to the hospital, she calls Brian in a state of panic.
They found out that there really is a problem. There's something here that Kara has not been lying. The doctors have missed this. I mean, you never expect that they're going to tell you your child's going to die if we don't do something tonight.
My biggest fear in the whole world would be that I would not be a mom anymore and I would no longer have her. I could not believe that after wanting a child for so long and finally having one, that after such a short time, God would want her back.
But Dr. Olkowski assures Julie that he will get to the bottom of the case.
I had a strong suspicion of what her diagnosis was, but I needed a spinal tap in order to confirm it. A spinal tap will measure the pressure on the brain.
The frightened young girl is taken in for the procedure, where a needle is placed in her lower spinal canal. The team measures, then relieves the life-threatening pressure on her brain by draining some of the fluid which circulates around the brain and spinal cord.
The normal pressure in the spinal canal is any place between 70 up to even 200 millimeters of mercury. Kara's pressure was well over 800, which is many times normal pressure. That confirmed for me that Kara has pseudotumor cerebri.
Pseudotumor cerebri is a rare condition in which there is an increase in the pressure of the cerebrospinal fluid surrounding the brain and spinal cord for no obvious reason. Symptoms, including severe headaches and dizziness, mimic those of a brain tumor, but in fact there is no tumor present, hence the name pseudo or fake tumor.
Pseudo what? I had never heard of anything even remotely like this.
As Dr. Olkowski walks the Lauers through everything that he knows, it becomes crystal clear that Kara was never faking any of her seemingly bizarre symptoms.
Kara had headaches due to the increased pressure on the brain. And when something's going wrong with the brain, sporadic body aches and pains can occur. Increase in pressure on the cerebellum can cause symptoms of dizziness and unsteadiness.
I finally had a name to all my pain, all my suffering. And everything I had said was real. I hadn't been lying at all.
We had a lot of relief that she was alive, but there was still a lot of tension as to whether she would ever see more than shadows after that point.
I have never seen a case of pseudotumor cerebri that was quite as severe and rapidly progressive as Kara's was.
It's a bittersweet moment for the Lowers. While there is no cure for the disorder, the medical team hopes that by having released the pressure on Kara's brain, the pseudotumor is under control. But the clock is still ticking. Dr. Olkowski is extremely concerned that there may be irreversible damage to Kara's optic nerves.
If not treated right away, she could have a permanent loss of vision.
As much as Kara loved life, I couldn't imagine her not being able to see life anymore.
At this stage of the game, there is only one way to save Kara's sight.
The next procedure that was done to try to save Kara's sight was called an optic nerve sheath decompression.
It's an extremely delicate procedure. The surgeon removes a portion of her skull so that he can access the optic nerve. Then he makes a small incision in the thin casing surrounding it to relieve the pressure.
It seemed like the surgery took forever. I don't think I sat still for more than 2 seconds. I just clung to my husband.
2 hours later, Kara is in recovery. As the anesthesia slowly wears off, the Lowers are holding their breath, wondering if their little girl will ever see again.
I woke up and I was in pediatric ward of the hospital. And I looked up at the ceiling and there were butterflies painted there and I could see them.
And she looked up and said, "Oh, Mama, look, there's our butterflies." And at that point, we knew she could see something, which was more than what she had been seeing.
Kara was a very fortunate young girl. She was very lucky to have survived this, and she was very lucky to have regained her eyesight.
What I really wanted to know, I guess, deep down inside was, why wasn't it caught any faster than this?
Kara was having a confusing constellation of symptoms. I think it was hard for others to try and piece her whole puzzle together. A very careful eye examination was necessary. I have the equipment available that allows me to look into the back of her eye that is not available to other doctors who are not ophthalmologists.
Today, Kara has regained her vision completely. And while she has had a permanent shunt implanted in her spine to help drain the fluid that continues to build up in her brain, she's determined to live her life to the fullest.
I'm 18. I'm in college now. I'm planning on going into art history. I have the world opened up before me with a lot of opportunities, and I plan on taking every one of them. This whole ordeal has brought me closer to my parents. They know when I say that something is wrong, that I don't feel well, that they're to believe me, no matter what the doctor says, that I know what I'm talking about.
If your child says they're in pain, listen to them. The doctor's only human, and the harder you push, the further they'll look.